To the January 23rd, 2023, City of Dexter City Council meeting. Thanks for coming. Come on up.
Sorry.
That's okay. Right. No, it's all right. Okay, so I'm going to call the meeting to order and ask everybody to stand. And Bonnie, if you would please lead us in the pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the
When you are ready, if you would please call the roll.
Aldag, here. Griffin, here. Hubbard, here.
Present.
Plath,
Here.
Semi-Pharaoh,
Here.
Keel,
Here.
Keating, here. Gregorio.
Here. Yes, thank you. Thank you. Now, I just still we can, for the work session, if you're down, Adam didn't notify me the open, and we're going to put 7. So it goes down as a Tuesday. Okay, item C on the agenda is approval of the meeting minutes from our regular city council meeting on January 9th. If there's someone who'd like to make a motion to approve the meeting minutes. Motion by Hubbard, thank you. Second by Farrell. Thank you. Any comments or changes on the meeting minutes? Okay. You want us to- yeah. That,
On page 7 of 8, under 2, consideration board review of hardship guidelines. My motion to amend the poverty hardship exemption to 2.5 times the federal level did not receive a second, but all motions should be documented in minutes. So I would request that be edited with the notation died without receiving a second.
good catch. Any other changes to the minutes? Okay, all those in favor of approving the meeting minutes with the one change, signify by saying aye, please. Those opposed? Thank you, motion carries. We have 2 items of free participation this evening. And the first one is a proclamation to recognize the Dexter High School football team. So I'd like all of you to come forward. Where's Lex? Come on up, right up to the podium. All right, right up here where we can all see you. All right, so I have a proclamation to read, but before I do, can each of you just introduce yourself really quickly? Tell us who you are, what position you play?
My name's Gerson Herder, number 8. I was a cornerback and the kicker this year.
Nice to meet you.
My name is Brock. I was number 80 with the defensive end.
My name is Nico Ricos. I was number 10 and I played linebacker.
Tucker Dunn, number 55, I was right tackle. Mikey Davis, number 1, receiver and safety. Joey Tesmer, I was number 5 and I was wide receiver. Wyatt Navarro, number 88, receiver.
Brady Sawyer, number 56, left tackle.
Reeves Taylor, number 3, I play quarterback. Cole Darby, number 11, I was a slot receiver.
My name is Nate and I play cornerback.
Bill Ivan, I coach the offensive line.
That's David Fetty, freshman TV coach. George Mikos, under defensive coordinator.
Bill James, head coach. Coach, thank you. Well, let me read the proclamation. With some great pride. Whereas the 2022 season of Dexter Dreadnought football marked our players and coaches' greatest success on the football field in the history of the program. And whereas the team's drive and momentum was evident from game 1 and culminated in a historic season that included their first Southeastern Conference Red title, their first district championship, and first regional title. And whereas the Dreadnoughts went undefeated for the first time since 1963, ending the regular season with a program high of 12 wins, including a thrilling and definitive victory over the team's arch rival, the Chelsea Bulldogs. Whereas that game's final score of 45-0 signaled the largest margin of victory ever over the Bulldogs and the first shutout of the rival since 1977. And whereas the victory over the Bulldogs also earned Coach Phil Jacobs his 100th career victory and helped amplify an already booming sense of pride and excitement throughout the Dexter community. Coach Jacobs was also named Associated Press Coach of the Year for Division 1 and 2. Congratulations, Coach.
Thank you.
Whereas seniors Cole Cabana, Micah Davis, and Brennan Perchek earned all state honors, and Cabana was also deservedly named the MLive High School Player of the Year. And whereas this team, which was led by a remarkable group of seniors, played with heart, skill, and determination, they brought our Dexter community together with their outstanding sportsmanship, unwavering teamwork, and exemplary character. Now therefore be it resolved on behalf of the entire Dexter City Council, we hereby honor the 2022 Dexter Dreadnought football team for your incredible accomplishments. We wish you continued success in the coming seasons and look forward to the undeniably positive energy that you will bring to our community again this fall. This proclamation is delivered on January 23rd, 2023. Congratulations, everybody. I have a few copies of these for you. Link back. Share. Appreciate it. Thank you for coming. Congratulations, everybody. We'll see you.
Thank you.
Now, I'm sure you want to stay for the rest of the meeting. But you don't have to. So that was the exciting prearranged for this. No, I'm just kidding. Our second prearranged participation this evening is from our auditor, Raina Emmons. Welcome back.
Thank you. Well, that's a tough act to follow.
I know.
Brandon Evans, number 15, running back. So it does count for some. My name is Brandon Evans. I'm a partner with PSLZ. It's my pleasure this evening to present to you the City of Dexter's annual audited financial statements for your fiscal year ended June 30th, 2022. Since the last time I was here, we have some new council members, so welcome, and some new members yet very familiar members. So nice to see everyone. Just starting out with some highlights. Once again, the city did receive the highest level of audit opinion possible, which is an unmodified opinion. So no exceptions, disclaimers, nothing bad to report tonight. Some highlights. Your main sources of income, of course, property taxes were up 1.7% this year, and that is all taxable value increase. There was a state shared revenue, another big source of revenue here. So state shared revenue is the sales tax and income tax that the state collects based and distributes down to the local units. That has been bumping along at about a 2% increase, maybe a 4% recently, but really literally just kind of slightly increasing each year. But this year, in fiscal year 22, they finally caught up with the 2020 census adjustment, which was a positive thing for the city. In the 2 years, so they adjusted for 2021 and 22, and you received that this year was an additional $52,000 in state shared revenue this year. So that was a little extra. So you have a significant increase this year over the prior year. But overall now you will be receiving more because the formula has been adjusted for the additional population. So for the whole year, including that 52,000 year increase, was 122,000 just in state share revenue from the prior year, just to kind of give you an idea of the magnitude there. Significant. So the general fund added to the general fund balance this year $508,000. The year before you dipped into fund balance, you had said the park project, that type of thing in there. But this year you spent $286,000 less than you had budgeted. You were under budget, primarily was Parks and Rec budget, the capital improvements that you didn't end up using this year. Major capital additions within the city this year included the Broad Street City offices, also the Second Street Road project, a Second Street water main, and the Dexter Crossings project. No new debt this year, happy to report. You paid down $1,168,000 in principal this year. Of course, the prior year you added the $2.5 million bond that was in fiscal year 21. So no new debt this year. Lastly, the pension plan. Your net pension liability actually decreased this year, $272,000, giving you an ending net pension liability of $214,000. The pension plan is 95.9% funded, which is phenomenal, up from 90% the year before. I'm not seeing that typically in other communities, so I'm happy to see that. Total net investment income in the trust this year was $620,000, just to give you an idea. That is measured every year on December 31st. So this December 31st, again, I'm not sure how we ended the year, but the market was definitely down in this fiscal year. So we'll have to wait and see. That's next year's report. And other post-employment benefit liabilities. You started the year with $159,000 liability, ended up with a $348,000 actually an asset. So big improvement there. You were from 93% funded to 119% funded this year. So that's exactly what we'd like to see. It's something that you in the pension plan, you've been making extra contributions. And that has definitely helped and has definitely moved the needle in the positive direction. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
I have a question.
Sure.
I mean, you come here and you always tell us we're doing a great job and give us all these accolades. We've got a big project ahead of us this year with the fire station. So I'm wondering, without really thinking to that, because that's not your department, like, where do you see room for improvement for us?
Are you talking in procedural?
Like in terms of, I don't know, what you do. I don't know. Yeah, finance.
Well, so the big things really are making sure that the general fund, has a healthy fund balance for anything that may be thrown your way, intentional or not intentional. And the pension liabilities and other post-employment benefit liabilities, those really are the big things. Most communities are really struggling to keep them even at 80% funded. That, that's great for other communities at 80% funded, and you're at 90-some%. And that's not something that you can, just flip a switch or, to make that better. You've been working on that for a long time. So that's one of the things that the city has. We've always put a lot of thought into things. You've always looked forward. And that's how we get to this report today is we've been doing things right all along. And you've been very fiscally conscious and, you have a great staff that is experienced and helps you monitor these things. And when I come in, there are communities I go into and I'm pretty much moving their numbers all around after year end. I don't do that here. I don't know if I did one journal entry? I didn't have one journal. So that just tells you the magnitude of what we're talking about. Of course, there's always things to do better. It's very exciting that you're going to be moving in, hopefully shortly, to this building, the administrative offices. That should have some, challenges of technology and things like that, and hopefully the residents will find you. But that's you've got a lot ahead of you, and in addition to the fire department, but you're doing everything right. So, and you all, like I said, your department heads are always thinking prospectively. How can they're not thinking once a year. It's like they're constantly trying to better themselves, better the community. How can I do my job more efficiently? that you're out there getting new, material, all the new things that are coming out, American Rescue Plan Act, that type of thing, you're taking full advantage of those things. And they're all new and they're constantly being thrown at the municipalities. So you've got a great team on board that's handling that. And let's take advantage of all the extra grant money that's out there. That's probably what I tell you. Let's maximize that and do some great things for this community as you've been doing. Thank you.
Questions, Zach?
Do you see any changes coming to how we have to account for things or extra liabilities or things that we ought to be aware of in the next couple of years?
The next couple of years. So you are in the process, I think you're about done with the state has the Uniform Charter of Accounts conversion project. Marie's been working on that, and she's about done. Let's see, so leases is another liability, but doesn't really apply to the city. We looked into that this year, and really what they're talking, the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, that's the governmental pronouncements that we have to abide by in the financial statements, is their biggest thing is in 2026, they're talking about redoing the reporting format again. So as far as additional liabilities coming down the road, they're with that new reporting model, they're also talking about changing their methodology of how they're reporting everything right down to revenues and expenditures again. So stay tuned. They haven't decided yet. They want to implement 2026, yet they haven't decided that things yet. So
Are there any best practices that we're not doing that you think we ought to?
I don't know why I'm surprised at that question every year, Sam. So,
Yeah.
but I truly, I do put some time thinking about that, but again, going back to, if Justin or Marie or anyone on staff has questions of, it's usually not how to do something, they already know how to do it, but it's the new stuff, like the American Rescue Plan or the Infrastructure Act, that type of thing. They're pretty good about hearing about what other communities are doing, what the state and the feds want us to do, compliance wise, that type of thing. So we have those discussions all year long, where, no one waits till the end of the year to, figure out what we should have done, or, we've been doing it. They like to be proactive. So trying to stay ahead of the curve, and that also brings us to maximize taking advantage of grant opportunities.
Well, one last, with looking for this, a nice transition, we didn't talk in the parking lot or anything. We are going to be in the next couple of years transitioning the position to someone new, so she can have more time to do things more interesting than sit there on a Monday night. So if there are any, I guess it's maybe not a now thing, but for the staff, ways that we can ensure smooth transition, and if there are any processes that need to be documented, that'd be appreciated.
Great, I will note that, and we'll make sure we keep that in mind going forward.
Raina, how does this building affect our audit from the addition of a building? And there's a part in here that talks about the straight line depreciation, and what useful life did you determine this as?
Probably 40 years.
40? Okay, so you just went right in the middle of the category.
I mean, I guess you can do 50, but 40 seems to be most buildings, as far as depreciation goes. Of course, we'll still be here after 40 years, but as far as depreciating out, that type of thing. How does it impact? Well, it's not like you didn't put any thought to it, you had no budgeting or planning for it. So if you had not done any of those things, if we hadn't run the numbers and projected, the appropriate number of bond, level of bond and that type of thing, we'd be in a different situation. But everything so far, we're going in, as planned. And you just, all we can do is really hope that there's no contingency, that type of thing, on any project.
Yeah. Thank you for coming this evening.
Oh, my pleasure. Nice to see everyone.
Okay, we are down to item E, which is non-arranged participation. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak this evening? If so, please come forward, state your name and address for the record.
Hi, everyone. My name is Joel Waddell. I am here from Congresswoman Dingell's office. I am Mrs. Dingell's Western Washtenaw field representative. So we just wanted to get out and make sure you were all aware that our office is a resource. We're here to support you and collaborate in any way possible. As we head into, the new district, the new year, new Congress. I know Mrs. Dingell is very excited to be adding the rest of Western Washtenaw. So please reach out. She enjoys even just going to small community events, that sort of thing, all the way up to like helping you guys out with federal grants, working through federal issues, anything it might be. We're here to support you guys and collaborate. So I know Mrs. Dingell is very excited. So I will make sure all of you have my contact info. I'll reach out. And we're all very excited to get rolling. Thanks.
Thank you, Joel. Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to speak this evening? Okay. Josh, I'm not able to read the online. Is there anybody there that wants to speak?
I'm not seeing any raised hands on.
No, continue, Doug, Sarah, Grace, okay. Okay. We will move down to item F, declarations of conflict of interest. Yes, sir.
I believe we're paying $100 to my employer for the consent.
Thank you. I traded some email back and forth with Zach, a couple weeks ago. I actually think our conflict of interest ordinance allows for all of us to make regular approval of bills, payments, contracts. There's a specific section in there that's pretty clear. And with regard to the fact that you may work at Colonel Orman, the regular paying of bills and stuff like that should not affect us. I think we actually thought about it ahead of time. I didn't realize it. I had to get back and look when we left the room the other day. It made me go and look, why did you do that? Like, nobody's ever done that before, although anybody can get up from a meeting anytime they want. We're not bound here by chain, right? But I appreciate that you recognize that for us, but I still think you could vote on all that, and what our conversation actually indicates that we can, so. I would encourage you to do that if you want to. Seeing none, then we'll move on to item G, which is approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Dan, thank you.
My second.
Second by Samantha, thank you. Any discussion on the agenda? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor of approving the agenda, signify by saying aye, please.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, thank you. We have no public hearings this evening, so we're down to item I, which is the regular communications. The upcoming meeting list is in the packet on page 83, as well as a letter from Carl Workman. Does anybody have any comments on the communications in the packet? Done?
When Justin, you have a chance, I would appreciate a last name adjustment from the meeting with. For me.
On the meeting calendar.
Meeting calendar.
Okay.
Believe me, I still go through a lot of things with small like that, I still have changed my stuff, so.
We'll do that, right?
Thank you.
Okay, seeing no other hands, we'll start with our reports this evening. Our first report is from our finance director / treasurer / professor. Marie, how are you?
I am good, how are you?
Doing great.
Slash payroll.
Do we need to add that?
Speaking of payroll, you all should have gotten your, finishes. Everything, I was getting 2s and 4s myself. You all should have gotten those by now. If you didn't, please let me know. So I want to talk kind of briefly. Well, first I want to thank Rena for coming out here and for the great job that they do for the audit. in the audit, I think she kind of touched on something with staff that I think is really important to reiterate. By the time we get to the audit, I mean, my year-end close is fairly easy. And it's easy because throughout the year, we have these quarterly meetings with staff. We have staff from the DPW guys up to Josh and Justin monitoring the budget, making the adjustments, looking ahead. We never have any surprises. So by the time Raina gets there, I mean, I'm closing within a month, you know, so it's not a one-person celebration when we get these good audits. It really is all staff. I did want to point that out. I'll talk briefly about the chart of accounts update that I kind of gave you a little synopsis of. The standard way throughout the state to do this with BSNA is to have BSNA do a conversion for us. Unfortunately, BSNA was not able to do this conversion for us in a timely manner to allow us to use our new ClearGov software to do the upcoming budget. So I did it myself. It was actually in an odd way for somebody like me, a lot of fun. I enjoyed it. There were very few glitches, so I was very happy with that. The one thing that we don't have that we would have had if BSNA had done a conversion for us is the history under the new number, because they would have taken the old number's history, merged it with the new. But in the future, when things slow down for them, we can still have them do that conversion and bring that history in, but for now, everything is able to hum along. In the financial statements, the credit accounts part or the revenue expenditure part, you will see the new departments in there. So if anybody has any questions about the department accounts or want to go through some of the things I changed, the changing the two funds types, back in the past, when we set up the solid waste fund, at that time, it was not self-supporting. So we set it up as a special revenue fund. Over the years, that fund has become self-supporting. So I thought, since we're going ahead and doing this chart of accounts change, we might as well change it to an enterprise fund. So now it's going to be treated in this fiscal year the same as sewer and water. I took the assets that formerly were under the financial wide statements, moved them into that fund. So they already have their assets, they have their depreciation, because we had all that information anyway. Same kind of idea with the equipment replacement fund. When we initially had set that up, we were really looking for more of a fund that we could set aside money in, and not necessarily a fund that was taking over all of the operations of the equipment, I mean, of the vehicles and whatnot. So once again, it seemed like a good time to make that conversion into an internal revenue fund, bring those assets in. We'll be doing the depreciation and all that sort of kind of again in the next audit. So that is kind of a major change, but really it's a change that needed to be done, and it was a good time to do it. Does anybody have any questions about the chart of account changes?
The next year's audit, that will be in the business type rather than governmental. Okay. And what was discussed?
I don't really have any comments on anything else in here, so if anybody has any questions for me.
Should we on her report? Zach.
Just, I didn't see in here, maybe sort of previously, but did you get on the MML finance again this term?
Yes.
Nice. Any word on what folks are predicting for the revenue sharing for the next fiscal year?
Not yet, no. We're still kind of talking a little bit about, are we going to get that excess revenue from the stabilization fund? I highly suspect that this year we will. They don't like to give answers up there on this kind of stuff. Probably because they don't want anybody, you know, making assumptions and decisions on something and they're not getting it. Next year, that's when the EMPP process changes. So I'm not sure exactly what's going to happen with that. And another concern with that too, and I think I touched on this in here. They changed the small parcel exemption from 80,000 to 180 of true cash value for personal property to small businesses. And I think I remember that the legislature did appropriate funds for the first year to make whole, but did not do anything for the future years. It was one of those things we're going to come get back to it. So I don't know. It really, we're not going to end up with a whole lot of personal properties left at this point, because one of the ones that we had that, a lot of the ones we had that fell in between that, or just above that 80,000 were all of our dentists and orthodontists. We have a lot of them. They're probably all going to be exempt now. So we'll just have to see how that moves forward.
Thank you.
So that they won't have to fill out any forms or,
The exemption between 80 and 180 is annual filing for now.
okay.
We'll see, they may change that. Like they did now. But it's amazing, you look at this and, we're gonna end up with very few personal properties. It's the Bushes and the LaFontaines. And
Okay.
those companies, that was moving.
Justin, over again. Thank you, Marie. Appreciate your good work.
Thanks.
Next up is our public services superintendent. Tim, how are you?
Good, how are you guys tonight?
Good.
Good. So, obviously, 2 weeks of reports in front of you guys, any questions, you can take those, and I have a couple of things right there.
Did you guys find the dead end manhole on Third Street?
Did not. So we got as far as we can go, which was about 120 some odd feet, and pushed it past the alley. So we've been talking, Matt Romine owns the property across the street next to it. And that's why we did that, to see if he can come across the street, tap into it. It looks like he'll be able to do it. So talk with him and see if we can get, maybe we'll purchase the manhole and have him install it. So,
What's up, people? Here on our, pump station generator.
the overspeed.
Yeah.
So we had this problem over in Westridge, actually, when you were here, and we thought it was transfer switch and it being the computer module. We think that's what's going on with this one. That we think we can get through to the new fiscal year before we start. It's still, it doesn't happen that often.
I think all the lift stations were put in around, the generators around 2,000.
That's what I thought.
I don't know what the life expectancy.
Those ones I'm not sure of,
Yeah, I
but
know.
that's something I'm got in the back of my mind and thinking of.
Thank you.
It's way early, but I saw the reference to paint on here, so I'm gonna throw out the request again that when we do have folks repaint the lines, or a couple spots where we changed configuration curves, so there's like a half parking space, and it looks like they've been blindly repainting that half parking space for a couple of years. It'd be good to get out there with a cone and just say, don't paint this, it's not a parking space anymore.
What are we talking about?
Comes to mind Ann Arbor, Huron, with the rapid flashing beacon. There's like 2 half parking on either side. And I also was told before I left for the meeting tonight that the overhead light at the alley between Central and Dover on Fifth is out.
It's like door.
Like with my backyard.
The farther down
Okay.
by Mr. Rush's house,
So sorry, that you said Dover and.
between Central and Dover on Fifth.
And just so you're aware, for those types of outages, we report that to DTE and get them out. They're usually pretty good within a couple of days to come out and make those
Yeah,
replacements.
Kirk gets the numbers on full, fills that in.
Tim, when we had that tree fall on the new part of the path over by Creekside. It hit the.
Yeah.
It hit the fence. Do we have a fence repair plan?
I will talk to Kurt about that, actually. I talked to him, I brought that up about 2 months ago, and I forgot to check in on that. But I know I thought he had got, pretty sure he has a quote. It's just a matter of when they get to it. I think that's what the problem is. So, let me double check with that.
Yeah, Kurt had reached out to a fence contractor to let them know that we needed to get it repaired.
Okay, good.
So I imagine it's probably on their radar, which turns out just a matter of when the contractor can get out and make the time.
We'll make it. We'll look once again.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you.
Who else? I got a few things, we replaced all the curb boxes that were bad on the Second Street project, that got done the other day, actually got done fairly quickly. The new hire CDL class training started today. So hopefully that will wrap up by the end of the week, get those going.
Well, 5 is, we took our first back heat test today, everything going when it should, we should have it up and running by Wednesday. And we started our state mandated potholing for galvanized piping this week too. So that's gonna be an ongoing process for a while.
How many sample areas do you have to check, or how many do you have to do?
Total's 89. They're laxing kind of on how much we have to do every year now. I think it's because obviously money for everybody. So I'm trying to get about 25 done this year, in this fiscal year.
Thank you.
Anything else? All right, thanks.
Thanks, Tim. Next up is Michelle, our community development manager. How are you today?
I'm fine. How's council this evening?
Good.
Yeah, good. Glad to hear that. Okay, before I go into my report, do you all have any questions for me? Go ahead, because I know you.
I don't have a question.
You're going to have a statement though, I'm sure. It's the RRC inside joke, folks. For people who are new, it's Sean's favorite Achilles heel.
Not saying anything.
Okay, if there's no questions, I'll fill you in. So the redevelopment ready communities program is something that we've ebbed and flowed into and out of starting in 2015 and then again in 2017. It's not a bad program at heart. It provides a set of best practice suggestions, recommendations, mandatory things that help communities become redevelopment ready. So everything from making sure that you've got good education for your planning commission and your officials. Are all your planning documents up to date? In other words, your master plan, your zoning, your subdivision ordinance, etc. Do you have a streamlined review process? Just basics like that. You had the best practice report that we had inside. We didn't have a problem with any of the things that they recommended or even, sort of pushed for communities to do, with the exception of one thing. And that was removing council from the review process for permitted uses, either if it's a site plan. We felt very strongly, excuse me, that our process works. Our process it's not a process that makes things take longer to get through. It's generally 99.9% when applicants don't provide complete site plans or complete application packets. And then there's that constant back and forth to get that information so that what's being told verbally fits consistently with what's on the paper. That site plan's the contract. Our process has worked well. When we went into the program in 2017, we did it because, like any other community that wanted to look at an ABC or NISHDA funding assistance, it became mandatory to be engaged. And if you weren't a traditional downtown, you had to be certified, and you had to do that by October 1st of 2017. So we, like a number of other communities, got our retrainings, all of that, and went through the report, and we pushed back on that one item. And in the report, you'll see it says, well, they prefer that we take council out. They were willing to allow us to demonstrate that our process doesn't hold people up. That was the fundamental thing that once we were over that hurdle, there was no problem. So that was I think that was ended up being 2018 or 2019 when the report and everything was finally done and accepted. Well, NEDC has changed their platform again, or I should say the best practices, and they will no longer honor that compromise. And we're right back to where we were before. And so the question, let me step back. In addition to changing that one item so that it's no longer, we'll work with you, but you must take counsel out. Or there's no sense in being the program. We no longer have to be engaged or working towards certification to access the funding, which was the main reason we got back into it in the first place. Doesn't mean they don't consider it, you just no longer have to be mandatory in order to access the funding. So we could get the funding if we needed it, be able to apply, access it, obtain it without being part of redevelopment ready. So the question that they had for council is, knowing all that, do you still want to remain engaged in the program?
So what's the deadline for that? I mean, and I guess you've done a nice job summarizing the background. Does that need to be an action item at a future meeting? I guess?
It doesn't, MEDC doesn't care if it's a formal action or not, they just need me to tell them. That's more of a question for the council. Do you want to take a formal action on it? Or do you just want it to be an informal?
Well,
Because technically your best practice report had a 3-year lifespan. It's expired, so. It's up to
I
you
was just
guys.
asking if we need to do something or.
You don't need to do anything formally. You let me know how you want to do it. If you want it formal, we'll put it on the next agenda. And when I say you, I'm talking about everyone at council.
Yeah, I found the process interesting to learn what they thought, but I don't feel any value at all. For this program. I'm more than happy to disengage.
So there's a lot of peculiarities in the redevelopment ready program. For those of you who haven't dove deep into it. I still think there's value in still being involved. I've seen communities that have gone into it head first and they've come out the other side doing really, really well. So I think it'd be good for us to adopt an overarching marketing strategy. Our website. Implementation matrices are good because we can see what's going on. Actively working on redevelopment sites. That's something that I think is good that the program says we should do. And if we're engaged in the program, they help provide connections to folks looking for sites. Spark does not do that. Spark only activates if someone comes in and says, we want a site in Dexter. So that's a benefit. I think it's good to be actively thinking about what sort of training we're doing as bodies. And this is my bias as a planner, I don't believe that legislative bodies bring a lot of value to reviewing by right projects. The Zoning Enabling Act of Michigan allows any entity to be the responsible party for approving site plans. It could be planning commission, it could be staff. I've worked in a community where it was staff that approved site plans. We don't have the expertise as a body to do the things that the planning commission should be much more well versed on. And if we don't trust them, then we ought to examine who's on there and what sort of training they've got. We can still stay involved in site plan review as through a development agreement. So once a site plan is approved, we can look at the bigger policy issues. So it is a peculiar program. We may not get all the benefits from it, but I still think there are benefits to being engaged.
Jamie?
Yep. A couple of things that jumped out at me, minor points. Again, I guess I don't have strong feelings either way about the site plan review. If there is some perceived benefit of us staying involved formally, I would be happy to discuss this further. Even if we don't stay involved formally, I think it would be interesting to go through this document and decide if there are additional changes we would want to make. The things that stood out to me on page 113 is under public participation, best practice 1.2. Talked about on the top of the second column, using digital communication tools like C++, to notify the city of code violations or needed infrastructure maintenance via mobile devices, or maybe it's an app or something like that. I think I've seen that maybe mentioned in other nearby communities. That seems like an interesting thing. I think right now you can navigate to our website and there's a way you can report a problem. It seemed like kind of low hanging fruit in terms of that, since it's specifically mentioned here. Oh, and then I was just, so, you know, talking about surveys, obviously we did a community-wide survey last year and I thought it was great. I'm not sure I know I have not personally had a chance to really digest all those findings. And so I had emailed Josh and Justin after our last parks meeting, suggesting that perhaps as we get into planning for this next fiscal year, if we could be reminded of, if at least in one of those packets of PDF, that those results could be included, because I know when we talked about how often would we administer a survey, there were some thoughts that, well, we wouldn't necessarily do it annually because maybe it would take a long time to implement things. And so I think at the very least, if we could be reminded of those findings, that would make that effort, I think, more worthwhile, because I think even when we got the results last year, it was sort of into the process already. So those are things that jumped out at me, looking into C-Click Fix and then seeing if we can get our past survey results and packets for work. And then whether or not we stay involved, I don't have a strong feeling unless there's some very explicit benefit to us, which maybe Zach mentioned, but it wasn't clear to me. But I would like the opportunity to go through this as a council, and maybe that is part of our budget work sessions too.
Yeah, don't get me wrong, I don't have a problem with some of the recommendations that says in here, there's certainly good things we can do without being in the program. But I'm not for phasing out council as part of the approval process for the site plan process. I think that worked well. Yeah, we're changing it, frankly.
The C-Click Fix thing,
I can hear you.
the C-Click Fix item that Ms. Griffin was talking about.
I'm gonna say,
C-Click Fix.
see, oh, yes, on page 113, sorry.
I thought I saw that Ann Arbor uses that or used it at one point in time. I thought maybe they discontinued it for some reason. I guess I'd like to know if that's something that other communities have had success with, or it's just not been helpful.
Okay, I can check it out. I'm not familiar with.
There are quite a few communities that do use it. I think generally they tend to be larger communities where, you know, if somebody says, you know, there's a pothole where, and then, you know, they can go and mark it on a map. With us, I mean, you know, we get folks coming in through the website, through our email, phone. I mean, it's not hard to track us down. I mean, there might be some folks who find it useful. I don't know that cost benefit analysis, you know, is the value of the software worth the dollar amount that we would have to pay, when it's just as easy to take a picture and send an email or, you know, through the website.
So, and I want to make sure I'm following what you were saying before. So we were, in 2017, we did get the redevelopment ready.
Engaged. We've never been certified,
Okay,
but we re-engaged by 2017.
right.
Went through our whole evaluation process, and then received our report in March of 2019. So we now officially have the roadmap to guide us along the path of working towards certification. Excuse me. So for instance, our master plan wasn't done yet at that point. Like November of 2019, that box was checked. The zoning ordinance was the next thing. And we're working on it. Did we work on everything in here? No, COVID did change a lot of things and redirect it. As Zach and Sean and others have pointed out, Jamie, there's some good structure, the best practices, setting aside how we feel or don't feel about the site plan aspect. There's some really good best practices. And they provide good guidance for regardless if you're working towards certification or not, they're best practices for a reason, and you can certainly incorporate them. It's just that the factor for being engaged in 2017 was that was the only way you were going to be able to access funding. At that time, the legislature was, well, you're federal, not state. The legislature was putting a great deal of pressure on NEDC to be able to justify the funding that they were giving out to communities, especially to Mishta and NEDC. This was one of the ways that they could provide that justification. Yet into the program, we're working toward meeting all of these best practices. Again, COVID changed a lot of things, the legislature went in different directions. And so now they are too.
So have we always been in the process of trying to get to the certification? Have we, I mean, aside from.
Loosely.
Yeah,
Loosely.
aside from improving our processes or having some best practices that are helpful, is there been anything that we've been the beneficiary of? How's the community benefited by us doing that, aside from improving the processes and best practices? I mean, is there really any development that we point to and say this is because of this? Okay.
There have been, the closest we came was, this would have been when Grandview Commons was going through. We had not yet pulled out of our work toward going for being in the program at that point. And when Mr. Brower packaged up his brownfield plan and sent it off, we had looked at MEDC's participation in that for those items that they could, and they rejected. And Sean and I actually had a meeting up in Lansing with MEDC because the project met all the criteria. And it had absolutely nothing to do with the development ready communities. It just decided not to follow their own guidance. They reversed themselves, but by that time it was too late. And it would have ended up costing the developer more to go through and redo his brownfield plan to then include MEDC's assistance. So we could have, we didn't. So far, the big project that we've always looked at and engaged MEDC with is our 3045 Broad Street project. We have brought them along with that one from the time I started, and I'm presuming that there were conversations before, but I don't know that.
So when you say a by right project,
Mhm.
where does a PUD fall in that? That's not.
That wouldn't be included. It would only be for those uses that come through for site plan review that are by right.
When was the last time we had a significant development that wasn't a PUD? That met all the criteria?
Care to Cure was a straight site plan.
Which one?
Care to Cure, 7390, Dexter,
Then the building mentioned one,
Gotcha.
the medical arts building. Dr. Holmes Dentistry, well, that's part of the Dexter Crossing PUD, but when he came in for it, the PUD portion was done. It was just his site plan.
So the one that's on Dexter and Harbor came to council for approval,
Yes, sir.
and it wouldn't have with the other.
Correct.
So was there anything that council did when that came in?
Council did or does with planning commission and all of its recommendations. The same thing any legislative body versus an executive body does. It's a check and balance. The best example I can give is when St. Joe's came in to occupy the space in Dexter Crossing. They had to go through an administrative review. They didn't end up having to go to the planning commission in this case. And excuse me, we were looking at, I always provide stuff for planning commission and council to provide comments. Planning commission had no comments to provide, but council did. They said, you should be asking for a sidewalk that goes from the public walk into Dexter Crossing. So that people would be able to utilize that public sidewalk and come to into the doctor's office. That's the kind of check and balance that happens, whether it's administrative and staff or planning commission sending you a recommendation. You guys you might catch things. Usually,
Let me ask you a different way.
okay,
If somebody comes in and it's a site plan that meets the ordinance, it checks all the boxes, there isn't anything that you point to and say that doesn't, or that's an exception or whatever it is. It's my understanding from when I was on council before that you really can't say no to that. They've met all the requirements.
that is technically true. If you look at everything black and white, but let's say the parent here, for example, they meet all their setbacks, they meet the right parking, their stormwater, etc. But the design of the building looks like a CVS. You know, there's a tower and the architecture just doesn't look right. The ordinance doesn't have specific criteria that's going to dictate or regulate the architecture. There's some minor standards, but even a CVS type structure could meet those. That's an example where if planning commission had said, yep, we're okay with that, council might say, yeah, you want to look at that because, you know, you're looking at flat roof architecture in a corridor where everything's through. Does that help you, Bob?
Well, just from a standpoint of, if they came to council, and they said, no, this is what we're gonna do. We meet all your requirements. You have to approve this. We wouldn't have a leg to stand on and say, no, they met all the requirements.
There's gray areas. I get what you're saying, yes. You have to be very careful.
Right, what I'm saying is, if we were to say council is not gonna approve by right developments, well, we don't really approve anyway. I mean, the argument we've always got is that they meet all the requirements. You wanna go to court with them over this because you're gonna lose.
Right.
So.
When you bring in subjectiveness, yes.
But for the most part, we don't approve by right. Technically, we don't approve by right anyway. Because.
You put the final stamp on it because of the way you write your.
Right, but it's really,
Kind of dictated already. you mean?
yeah, it's like, it's a rubber stamp at that point because they meet all the things that you put out there, to start out.
I hear what you're saying. I go back to the check and balance. If the planning commission has missed something, council has the opportunity to close that and reform that.
And I agree with you. I'm just saying that for somebody to say you don't waive your approval for by right development it's semantics, right? Because
I
it
get what
doesn't,
you're saying, yeah.
it doesn't give you the opportunity to have the discussion that you're talking about, to say, these are things that we think from our community standpoint need to be improved, even if it's not the letter of the law.
Correct.
So you're sort of giving up the opportunity to have that discussion as, even though
Mhm.
they still get the privilege of saying, I meet your ordinances, so.
Right. It only takes one bad apple to mess it up for everyone. And if you've got communities out there that don't follow their ordinance and create a bunch of hurdles through a review process, there are loads of examples. Jack, I'm sure you could recite a number of them where, you know, the planning commission was okay with one thing, but when it got to council, council didn't like that. They send it back. The planning commission doesn't like that, but they like that. We don't have that. We've been blessed by having a very educated planning commission and a very educated city council in planning and zoning, as opposed to those aren't disciplines that are really all that important. Let's just move on. So, like Zach said, in the enabling legislation, it doesn't specifically state that a legislative body has to be. It also doesn't prohibit it. But this was something that MEDC leadership felt very strongly should be followed, so that's what we're at.
Thanks.
Floor is still yours.
Thank you. Sorry, this took a little bit longer than we expected.
That's okay.
Interviews for the DDA strategic plan, they're tentatively set for February 1st. There's two, one in the very early morning at 8, and the other one at 6:30 in the afternoon. And then February 3rd, 8 a.m. Is the third one. Again, Carlisle Wortman, McKenna, and CIB. Excuse me. Quick enforcement update, 3536 Dover. I got an email today that they had cleaned out the rest of the violations, including the trailer, inoperable trailer. I went out, I did an inspection, everything's done. And it's very timely because the court action was this afternoon and we were able to ask for dismissal. I'll be sending out a report that I got from Ann Arbor Spark on employment and employers. I have not had a chance to go through this report. It came in this afternoon. But it's a benchmarking report. And the last thing, when it gets to your conversation about this, I'll just give Kyle kudos. He's always challenging us and encouraging us to think about the best ways we can be true to the development pattern that was started with the city. And he's very much into the new urbanism. And I was not aware that he was doing this. So when I saw his suggestion for maybe how you could do both, I thought it's worth keeping an open mind to and see where that goes if it has any legs. That's it. I have no more. I think I should be done.
Yeah, go ahead.
One question. Any update on a downtown grocery store? A
Downtown grocery store. So,
or bodega or something like that?
So, I had a conversation with a woman who, she and her husband have bought both of the commercial units in 150 Jeffords. One is going to be an office, and the other one, they had initially, before they bought it, asked about it being a co-working space kind of thing. And before they bought it, the realtor went to the homeowners association and asked, and they told them, no, you can't do that. And so I found that out today. They bought the space anyway, and they're gonna find some way. But it came about because I asked her what she was gonna do with that space because of the possible grocery store or that special market. I need to have a conversation with the homeowners association because co-working space would be a use that's approved. There are very specific prohibitions, bars, adult uses, marijuana, etc. Anything that would have a negative impact on the residential. It does not allow the homeowners association to arbitrarily or formally amend those bylaws that would limit a use that is allowed by the PUD. I double checked all that. So, we may have another opportunity. We just keep my fingers crossed. You're welcome. Sorry.
Thanks, Michelle. We have a written sheriff report in the back. Comments on the sheriff report. On the city manager report, Dustin.
Yeah, just a couple of quick things. The first is you might recognize, you might see a new face at the dais here. We had interest in a recording secretary position from Georgia Frost. Ashley's been with us before as the substitute recording secretary. Pam wasn't able to make it tonight. But going forward, we're working on training Georgia on the procedure here to get her up and running and serving as our new recording secretary.
Thank you.
We're starting to advertise for our annual student representative appointments. Those appointments typically happen May, June timeframe. But typically we start advertising early to build interest. School lets out, so that way folks can talk to their friends and you know, let other folks know that, hey, this opportunity is here, if you're interested. We'll also be reaching out to our current student representatives to let them know that they can reapply if they're not graduating this year. In the packet, I provided a draft agenda for the work session on Saturday, February 4th. I think we had talked at the last meeting that we might start it at 9:30 because of the morning forum meeting. I don't know if that's still something that we're looking to do. But these are some topics that I wanted to put in front of you and see if you have any other topics that you would like to add to this list, you can shoot me an email and we can work through that. The other thing that I included in the report is we're getting towards completion of construction here. Finally. But one thing that I wanted to do before we actually made the move is do a public open house and open the building up to the public and do tours and that sort of thing. And so I was looking at the end of February to hold that. I think we're looking at February 22nd. I don't know if anybody has any thoughts or if you'd like to see a different day or multiple days or anything like that. But our goal is to, you know, once construction is complete here, you know, they're planning construction cleaning next week, I believe. And then we walk through for punch list, get final approvals from the building department and fire, and then start the moving process. On the agenda for tonight, you have an item for getting moving support for the offices. But we're making progress and want to show folks the progress that we've made.
It's exciting. That's a good idea for the openness. Or running after, whatever your preference.
All right.
From my perspective.
So, yeah, we'll plan on February 22nd from 4 to 7 p.m. And hopefully you can all make it. We'll start advertising that. That's all I have for you.
Any questions, you Justin? Okay, thank you for preparing the draft for the workshop. I wanted to highlight a meeting that Justin and I had last Thursday with Congresswoman Dingell. We met with her actually right here in this room. She contacted me and invited Justin to attend. We talked about a lot of different things. I tried to list those in my report for you. She was particularly interested in the cleanup requests that Eagle's asking where we're potholing of Main Street and public areas related to the special contamination. She was interested in being a part of those meetings. So I think that's a good thing. We got what, 25 minutes? It was pretty quick. She was in and out. She was just coming from Manchester and got a busy schedule, but it was nice to meet her again and she's interested in being a part of it. So Joel, thanks for being here today, representing your office. I do have a meeting coming up at the end of the week with Will Hathaway, the South Township Supervisor, and David Lutton. Reference a meeting, I think it was on the 16th, when I met with this supervisor. Sile's been meeting with Mr. Lutton to kind of talk through development opportunities and especially related to the preservation of a lot of that land and the woodlands. I haven't heard from Mr. Lutton, so I don't know if he's in agreement with Sile or not, but it's Friday. I was invited to attend a meeting between the two of them, so I'm gonna try and keep that. And I'll fill you in as soon as I know how that goes, but there are conversations continuing, and Mr. Lutton has been pushing to try and understand what would be allowed. So, my sense is that Zile would like heavy preservation of the majority of it. At least that's the feeling I get from talking to Mr. Hathaway. Anybody have any questions for me on anything? Okay, any council member reports? Okay, we have a consent agenda that has 5 items on it. Is there someone that would please move the consent agenda?
I move we approve those 5 items on the consent agenda, bills and payroll in the amount of $341,265.36. Proposal from Nelson Tank Engineering regarding painting of the water tower not to exceed $16,000. Purchase of a Bobcat loader not to exceed $50,119.16. They don't let me drive it. Appointment of Jordan Downey to the Parks and Recreation Committee and proposal from Men on the Move for moving this office stuff not to exceed $6,500.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. When you're ready, please call the vote to approve the consent agenda.
Holden? Yes. Kevin Farrell?
Yes.
Schlapp?
Yeah.
Griffin?
Yeah.
Michelle?
Yes.
Hubbard? Yes. Leo?
Yes, motion carries. Thank you, everyone. We have no unfinished business, so we're down to new business item M1, which is consideration of setting a public hearing to consider an amendment to the city's subdivision ordinance for our meeting on February 27th, 2023. Zach?
So moved.
Moved by Michelle, thank you.
Second.
Second by Dawn, thank you. Okay, we're moving the second. Oh, Zach, go ahead.
I have some comments, questions, but if you're, I can wait till after.
It'll be really brief. You heard me before. You have all of the information regarding responses to the previous questions. Planning Commission recommended approval of the of the subdivision ordinance after it held a public hearing back in on October 3rd. That public hearing is not sufficient to meet the charter requirements for general code ordinances, which requires council. So that's why you need to set the public hearing. The one question that has come up at subsequent meeting had to do with the length of cul-de-sacs. The intent of the master plan update was to really embrace traditional neighborhood design. And I've identified different future land use categories and what their intent is to help I'll give you an idea or an understanding of why the reduction of the length of cul-de-sacs was put into the subdivision ordinance. One of the things that Megan will go over, if you want her to go through the proposal, she's done a shorter one. We could take the that maximum length of the cul-de-sac and keep it at that restricted length of 200 feet for residential districts. The village residential, the Baker Road corridor, and village commercial are similar. But when it comes to the suburban residential, the Dexter Ann Arbor Road, light industrial, research and development, you can allow that to be a range from the 200 to the 500 without going more than 500. That at least gives the opportunity to, for those more suburban type developments, the option for something that looks more like Westridge or parts of Huron Parks. I can answer any questions that you've got. I can turn it over to Megan to go through the PowerPoint, whatever you'd like.
Anybody have any direct questions? After you had your hand up. Do you wanna-
Yeah, I had some direct questions, but I can wait till the end of the presentation.
Okay, whatever your preference. Then, well, that might.
Okay.
Share what she's gonna share and we'll budget. Thank
Good
you for coming
evening.
tonight.
Hey, thanks for having us back again. Megan Masson, the Knox Carl and Associates. The subdivisions ordinance, just to remind you all, it's different from the zoning ordinance. It is for new subdivisions. So typically this is going to be 20 acres or more. And it will be most likely something that's annexed and coming into the city because you just don't have that much vacant land at this point. But as Michelle expressed, the intent was that the design and the layout of the streets, landscaping and property lines for future residential, commercial, and industrial have the opportunity also to mimic the development patterns which are here in the city. And you have a village pattern and then you have a suburban pattern. And the subdivisions ordinance is very much based on a suburban model. And so a lot of the changes that are proposed have the opportunity then for that village to be replicated. And so if you could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. They have provisions for complete streets, alleys, which right now the subdivision ordinance prohibits. Which, but if you know, if you're walking down in the downtown or in your village neighborhoods, those are one of the main design assets and features of that area. The street and block layout, so how long the blocks are, how wide they are, and the circumference of them. Connections to the trail system and mandating those, again, another asset of the city of Dexter. And then bicycle lanes or in bicycle paths or lanes in development are also proposed. You can go to that. Thank you. We had a lot of discussion about the cul-de-sacs at the last time that we were here in November. And what I recommended to Michelle, and she's put it in her memo to you, is that we use the same model that we've used for different street design in the subdivision ordinance, where those things that are looking to in the future land use plan mimic the village pattern, those have a different standard than the more suburban, more industrial type of development. So again, the 200-foot maximum length through the village. So village residential 1 and 2, the Baker Road corridor and the village commercial or similar, and then 500 feet would be the maximum for the remainder. And it says or similar at the end because those refer to future land use categories, and it's very possible that the future land use might change. You might have another rehaul of your master plan in 5 to 10 years. And so it's important to keep that or similar in case things change, and so that it relates to something back, because the subdivisions ordinance is not something most municipalities revisit very often. Usually it's a once every 20, 30 years time frame. So next steps are a public hearing. I understand that there are some questions from council members. And then I think that I would suggest that in between that time of the public hearing, especially if there's things that have to deal with engineering, to consult your city engineer and have them weigh in on things. And then to make it, then changes could be made by council in their final motion to approve. And I would be happy to answer any questions.
So Megan, remind me where we're village residential 1, village residential 2, Baker, all the.
So village residential 1 and 2 are all basically all the plats of the village. So yes, the original plats. Baker Road goes down to where the fitness center is, and across the street there.
Yeah.
And then obviously the downtown was part of those.
So, for example, if the property is south of Grandview on the west side of Baker, somebody bought all of those and said, I want to do something residential. That's where the 200 maximum would apply?
Yes. It would be future land use plan for that category. So I believe those are all future land use planned for either the Baker Road corridor
And
or,
that assumes that they're public streets.
that assumes that they're public streets, yes.
Remind me, for Grandview, what are we, that, they're not public, right?
So Grandview, there are no streets within Grandview. Those are all drive aisles. Fire department required them to name, for addressing safety, or an address for safety. They're not streets, they're drive aisles.
So the old village, then, Third Street, Second Street, First Street, that's certainly within village residential 1 or 2, right?
Yes,
So, I mean, they don't have a true cul-de-sac at the end of Third Street, but it's become a dead-end street because of what we didn't, because we didn't choose to connect it to Huron Farm or Huron whatever, which we then also have. Where do we see the 200 feet mirroring anything?
So if you don't know, Huron Farms, all of Huron Farms cul-de-sacs are 200 feet or less, with the exception of the one at the very end, which is Wilson Court, which is basically the terminus of the city boundary.
Yeah.
In West Ridge, Park Ridge and East Ridge are more than 500 feet.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how those were approved, because the 500-foot rule is what the ordinance is. But Ridgeway is less than 500 feet.
In Glacier and Boulder.
Yeah. If I remember right, because I did that on Friday, I was looking at that. The problem with having,
But I was talking to Joe about this a little bit, and he made the comment of the going forwards, he says, I don't know anybody that doesn't like living on a cul-de-sac, it doesn't find it a desirable thing.
it's not the cul-de-sacs are bad things. If you have a very long cul-de-sac, remember, you have no road crossing then. So it requires then mid-block crossings that aren't designated. That's not really a safe thing, even in a neighborhood. So, that's part of the reason for having a cul-de-sac not be so long. If it's only 200 feet, where it begins is that mid-block crossing. I don't think that we can visualize what I'm trying to make.
and while I live in a cul-de-sac inside of a township, that is less than 200 feet. From an urban design standpoint, if you were an idealist, you would, in those future land use categories where it was supposed to mimic the village, you would not have cul-de-sacs at all. What having a cul-de-sac does is a couple of things. One, it creates privacy for those residents. And that's why they really like it. I will admit, when my boys were little and 7 and 5 and ran everywhere, the fact that we didn't have traffic on our cul-de-sac, to me, was an asset. But on the flip side, what I recognize about the fact that I live on a cul-de-sac is that my neighborhood is not very walkable. I have actually our neighbors who come through our lawn to walk their dogs, and we have permission. We've given them permission, but if they want to get from point A to point B, they actually have to take a much longer way around. Also, if you think about it from a driving point of view, with the transition to electric cars, hopefully there will be less pollution and less and whatnot, but it creates more driving. Also, the long cul-de-sacs from a fire safety point of view, if there's, and this I dealt with in suburban communities where they had 1,000 feet as the maximum. If there was an accident in the middle, say 200 feet in, there's no way for the fire truck to get through and get to somebody at the end of the cul-de-sac, whether it's a fire or heart attack. So those would be the arguments for it. We're not trying to ban cul-de-sacs, but recognizing that developers also very much like them because they can maximize, those are the lots that go first because people like them. Again, this would be for a specific, if you went from city and suburban type of construct, which you used, which we proposed in the subdivisions ordinance. This would be for a piece of property probably that's annexed in, and most likely I would say is maybe where the Knights of Columbus is that would going down Dexter Chelsea Road, that would be right adjacent to and likely look like an extension, or you want it to be an extension of the village land use pattern. And there to think about what would that structure be and what would you like to see it to be if it was to mimic what was across the river. But if we don't set those rules, then you'll get what your rules, you get what your rules lay out. So that was and we had a lot of discussions. I think both City Councilwomen Hubbard and Griffin can attest that we've talked about that quite a bit on the steering committee as well.
So why does it say cul-de-sacs and cul-de-sac streets shall be avoided? If they just told me that we're not experiencing them, we're used to them.
Again,
We can also correct that.
we can also correct that.
To stuff that is within, village 1, village 2, village commercial. And Baker Road.
So. Like you said, people often prefer those type of streets for residential standpoint because of the exact ideas that you mentioned. I don't know that I agree with the walkability part of it. I regularly have people run down one side of my street, around the loop and back up the other. Next door neighbor walks the dog up the street, across the street, and back down, does that loop around the cul-de-sac on a regular basis. In the ordinance, in the part about industrial parks, there's, I think it's number 7 or something there. It says that the parks will be constructed so as to or discourage or prohibit through traffic. Our biggest complaint, at least in my experience, the biggest complaint that we get from residents, it's on through streets where traffic's cutting through, either down Fifth Street, down Webster, down, any road that potentially parallels Main Road in a layout of that type becomes a cut through. And cul-de-sacs prevent that. If Fifth Street went halfway and it had a cul-de-sac and it came halfway the other way and it had a cul-de-sac, there wouldn't be any cut through. We wouldn't have all those complaints. I mean, it is nonstop. Bridgeway, Paul, I don't know what Paul's last name is. One of the residents there, literally for 20 years, 15 years he's been there, has been complaining about traffic driving past. Residents on East Ridge constantly complaining about traffic going past. I mean, it's just ongoing, and any one of those, if they were on cul-de-sacs, would not have, nobody on the cul-de-sac says the traffic is too crazy in my street. It just doesn't happen. People don't have it. And maybe the length doesn't have to be, like you said, 500 or 1,000 feet or whatever. But the thing is, even on those longer cul-de-sacs, I've never gotten a complaint from everybody that, and literally I've gone down those streets and knocked on those doors and talked to those people. And that's just not a complaint.
But that's why any annex land where there's going to be, where you're likely to have the new residential.
Yep.
You could do the more suburban, the way the master plan was set up and the way the zoning ordinance and subdivision are set up. You could do that more suburban pattern. But the intent in the master plan from planning and council was to maintain the traditional design and layout of the village. So the only area, like Sean identified, that has the potential for development, and that's the one on Baker Road, would be in the traditional form. Everything else outside the city, you could do either one.
And the decision before you is whether to have a public hearing.
I mean, I don't want to argue with you about the benefits of cul-de-sacs or not, and urban design, we could be here all night. If there's a majority of council that has a specific instruction on those, it is no problem at this point to change the language. We would just need a decision from you about what that is, and then a decision from you about when to hold the public hearing. And there is ample time in between now and the public hearing, if you're given instruction to change things so it's available for the public hearing, or ample time after the public hearing for the council to instruct changes and for us to go forward.
Mr. Zach?
But I think there is a bit of confusion about the walkability with cul-de-sacs, not necessarily along the cul-de-sac, but if Mr. Semifero's kids had friends who lived across from Mr. Keogh's house and they weren't able to cut through, they would have a significantly longer walk to get around there. And that's what the street system does. I happen to live on a street where a bunch of people do cut through, and nothing in nature is free. If you have a bunch of cul-de-sacs, guess what? You're exporting your traffic onto all the other people. So I'm comfortable with keeping it 200 feet, maybe allow for industrial getting a little bit bigger. And the reason why I say I'm comfortable with that is when we had the street design up there, if you saw the one from the original plats, you see that, you know where it is. If you see the street layout from Westridge here on Farms, Dexter Crossing, it could be 24 different developments in Scioto Township. And I think we do better as a community when we accentuate and try to embrace and build upon and encourage the things that are unique for us here. And having that old system, I think, is more beneficial and something we can do that other communities can't do. Just some quick little detail stuff. On page 195, this is radii number 17. I would be appreciative if staff could maybe look at ways that we can reduce that, because these are very suburban standards meant for cars to go really fast. And when the 25-foot radius for local streets, for example, is applied on Central, I can drive that 25, 30 miles an hour in my car without slowing down. And that does not encourage walkability, doesn't encourage neighborhood feeling. So it'd be good if we could give a peek at that. 19 street drainage. Again, I go back to the things that make the village unique. We don't have a lot of curb downtown. And one of the benefits of that is we don't have to have the wide streets, because if we have company over, we can pull literally onto the grass. Another advantage is to sheet flow of stormwater. When we get a heavy rain and our house is down at the bottom, we have between 200 and 300 gallons of water sitting on the grass before it goes in the drain. If it were curb and gutter, we'd have to figure out what to do with that extra 200, 300 feet or cubic gallons rather of water. That costs money. That's something we have to maintain. So I'd like to see an opportunity for not necessarily curb and gutter, but something that matches the downtown village. 21. MDOT and County Road Commission standards are really, really big. I'd like for us to include reference to NACTO, which is more city-based. There's a fun quirk that if you do a subdivision off from a county road, your neighborhood road has to be bigger than the county road you drove in. And so I'd like for us to match what we've got. On page 196, I suppose it'd go on 196 under pedestrian ways. I would like to see if it is a really long block, like more than 660 feet, to have a mid-block crossing.
I think that is in at a later point,
Okay.
but I will double check. Okay.
197 depth of the lots. I personally like to see that just float with whatever the zoning district dimensions are. And I think that's it.
So Zach, I have a question. Go back to your walking thing. So you're saying somebody wants to take a walk around the block. And the example uses from Joe's house to my house.
Well, I'm gonna say across from your street, because, or to your front door if they can't walk through.
Yeah, okay. Do you really think that if a cul-de-sac is 400 feet versus 200 feet, the person isn't gonna walk 200 feet and then half a block, you think the extra 200 feet is really gonna prevent them from the walk they're taking?
I think it significantly reduces the likelihood. You're gonna let the 5-year-old kid walk the extra, are they gonna want to, or they?
Well, no, now you're getting into parenting. decisions, that's totally different. That's totally different thing, but the length of, if you're going for a walk. And you're willing to walk 200 feet by a half a block, by a whole block, by another half a block. You're probably willing to walk the extra 200 feet that if the cul-de-sac was deeper than you started from. I just don't agree, I don't agree with the walkability premise at all. It's
Somebody
right.
could be handicapped, or, you know, have mobility limitations, and they're trying to actually get to a neighbor's house.
Well, I think it, but in that case, they're probably not going at it alone, and there's another way to do that. I mean, again, it's not like that too, when you're going that distance. Which is 1,000 or 1,500 feet, the extra 200 feet is not the problem, the choice that you're making. You know,
Well, and that's the case for
You
no
decided to
cul-de-sac,
walk.
because instead of 1,200 feet, it's 250 feet. Right, if the cul-de-sac connected through, you don't have to go all the way around, you could just go 150 feet. So would you rather go 150 feet or
What do you
50?
mean by cul-de-sac connected through? If it connected through, it would be a street.
Well, yes,
Well. Nobody's arguing against connected streets.
Yeah, so again, the decision is
I just don't know where these things have come from. Have our actual residents have made these statements that are driving these? I don't believe it.
Can I say something about being, I mean, Jamie, tell me if you didn't hear this too, but I feel like when we were going through all this as the subcommittee, the only reason we even talked about this, and Megan said it earlier, is just to leave open the option for a developer to have something that looks more like the downtown and less like one of the subdivisions. Right? I mean, that's the whole premise, that was the whole premise of this conversation on the subcommittee. Because we just wanted to leave that open.
So I get that, but when I look at the downtown, as you're describing it, the downtown has dead end streets.
Okay,
And you not want cul-de-sacs at the end, bulbs?
no.
You just want them to dead end.
Sure,
Okay, well, the fire department won't be happy with that.
That's
But-
why,
but
that's why.
That's why the bulb occurs. But I mean,
I mean,
it look, to me, that's what we have. What we have is more than 200 feet. If we wanted it to look the same, the standard wouldn't minimize it to 200 feet. It's just not consistent. At least what I walk around, but
And
I realize we're just trying to set a public
Mayor
hearing.
Keo, to answer your question, where the limitation on the, to decrease the cul-de-sac and to say that they're discouraged comes from new urbanism and basing things on an old layout, like the village flat here, where there were no cul-de-sacs, there were dead-end streets that went into alleys, and then eventually when the city grew, the plat grew, and then when you grew in the 60s and the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s, then you had a different pattern, because people were moving in different ways. So that's where that came from, and we had a resident who was on the subcommittee, who I suspect if he was here, would very much say that there shouldn't be any cul-de-sacs at all, ever again. So that, to answer your question, that's where those came from.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes.
So. You made a comment when we were going through that, you said if that's something the council decides that they will do, then we'll pay them to do that. The same thing applies to the other comments that were made tonight, the comments that Mr. Michelle made.
Yeah.
Those things should be incorporated unless there's a decision or direction from the council.
Yes.
Okay, so we have a motion by Michelle, second by Hubbard, to set a public hearing for February 27th. Any further discussion? Thank you for being here tonight. Appreciate
You're
it.
welcome.
Please call the vote to approve setting the public hearing.
Griffin,
Yeah.
Hubbard, yes, Senator Farrell,
Yes,
Michelle,
Yes.
Alden,
Yeah.
Schlaf,
Yes.
Keel.
Yes. Motion carries. Thank you. New business item number 2 is discussion of public safety facilities. Justin, I'll turn this over to you to, is that what information you provided?
Forward, so, the last meeting, council had a brief discussion about, a brief continuation of discussion on, 50 facilities, and there were a few questions that came out of that meeting. Steve Armstrong and I, met and, talked through some of those questions and, tried to come back with as much information as we could gather, between that meeting and this one. And so, there were some questions about the number of runs and the locations to which, runs were occurring. We tried to provide some maps on, what those runs look like. Chief Armstrong put together, a map in which there's some hand-drawn, numbers. But that was also something that we had looked at a number of years ago, and on page 225 is a map that we had come up with in 2018 for within the city, the number of runs to each neighborhood. There's also run to the different townships and how they are occurring in each area. Chief Armstrong and I also talked about some routes and how the trucks might run from each location, 8140 and MAV. And there is some rough run maps on page 230 and 231. There's obviously nothing in there that says that they couldn't necessarily go a different way. But those are just some rough ideas based on the layout of the city and the locations of the proposed public safety facility for the two locations. Also continued to include the memos from David Gas that were provided a couple of meetings ago. And then Chief Armstrong indicated that there were of the runs that take place, approximately 75% are emergent, which are likely to run lakes and sites, which would potentially have an impact on the neighbors and or houses along which a run route might run through the different streets. Does anyone have any questions?
I do, go ahead, Jason.
I was just gonna ask for the run routes, so this includes, I'm sorry, for the fire runs, the numbers of runs, that includes any vehicle leaving the station.
So I believe the numbers for downtown also include walk-ins and those on the immediate trails.
This isn't just like medical or not medical, it's like any reason somebody is leaving.
That's my opinion. I think I'm correct me if I'm.
Yeah, right. It's a look back.
Right.
As far as a snapshot of where are the calls that we're responding to, with the caveat that as our staffing potentially improves, increases at the substations, will diminish some of the medical responses out of the village to the townships, because they'll be able to get some of those calls themselves without responding to vehicle from the city.
But so the runs that are for the fire runs for city neighborhood, those are runs that terminate in that location of the city, so it doesn't include the ones that.
Justin, what, I'm on page 230. On the back end.
Okay.
What are the red X's represent?
Locations where there may be difficulties with turning radius or locations that are otherwise impassable. And so like making that turn onto Central Street from Main Street, or making the turn from Central Street onto Main Street, or Main Street onto Central Street, is from my understanding a difficult turning radius for the larger trucks.
They still do it for some runs though.
Yeah, it's a difficult turn coming from the Mass and Meadowview site, not, it would be a primary route coming from 8140.
Okay, so those that red X doesn't apply that on this road.
Right.
Okay, what's the red X down on, is it Parker?
That bridge, we can't take the big trucks over that bridge. It got derated.
Oh, did it get derated?
6 months ago.
Okay, I guess I missed that.
So when we respond there, we have to work around that.
Although, I did hear from, Washington County Road Commission today that, they are going to be looking to do a project to replace that culvert, this summer.
Okay, and then the other one is that Inverness?
I believe it's in Inverness.
Okay, I understand that one. Okay, just want to clarify what those were.
And so I mean, the question that I have to council is how would you like to keep moving forward? So, my intent was to keep bringing this back as a topic to city council for each meeting, unless city council tells me otherwise or gives me another direction.
Well, at the last meeting, when we started talking a little bit about thoughts on location, the comment that I made was that I'm concerned about the disruption or the change that would occur if we move the site to the green site. And this illustrates it. This illustrates the volume that's gonna go back through the city and down in streets that otherwise don't have that much current volume of medical routes.
Another disruptive piece that it doesn't speak to is just the return from a major, like a fire incident, where we're cleaning hose, we're cleaning trucks, we're backing vehicles in, and that can be any time of day or night, and often that involves some outside work, which does generate some noise. So it could impact immediate neighbors, just in that process of returning to service.
Gotcha. Wow, where's that?
Oh, I just want to clarify as a dummy, the current site basically requires driving through downtown for everywhere we go. Depending on how far you define white town, downtown. The MAP site would mean that all of the runs to Webster Township would not have to go through downtown. Is that my understanding correctly?
Right.
I said by downtown, but yeah.
The Baker to the aqueduct viaduct.
We would be turning north prior to getting there.
And we wouldn't have to drive for downtown for Huron, for Dexter Crossing, for the industrial park, for the schools, for most of the downtown. Would just be the runs to Westridge, Cedars, and to Dexter Township. However, you mentioned the runs to Dexter Township, the medical runs are likely to be handled in-house, at least the ones not immediately, because there's eventually going to be 2 folks out there.
Right, there still is a section of Dexter Township immediately adjacent to the city that station 1 is closer and would be the primary response area, but yes, it would limit, probably 2/3 of.
You mentioned the coming back and having to decontaminate equipment. I have seen in the past where trucks are parked in the middle of Ann Arbor or Main Street in the center turn lane because there's nowhere to park. That, well, I guess it's not a question, but an observation. That's very disruptive to traffic too. That's all.
Wow.
Can somebody talk me through how the decision was made to present us with this particular run site through the old village? And I know it's my neighborhood, so I'm not like doing a not in my backyard situation here, but it is a neighborhood. Same as Dexter Crossing, same as Huron Farms. So whether you want to call it downtown or not, it's still a neighborhood that functions pretty much the same way that the subdivisions function right now. That'd be a huge change for everybody around there. And I'm not talking in terms of, you know, sounds of the lights and sirens. We in that neighborhood hear that no matter where it goes right now. I'm talking about the people, there's not sidewalks on every street in that neighborhood. There's people always walking, there's kids out. It's a neighborhood, so I don't know if there's a better way to get through that neighborhood. I guess I'm just wondering how you guys came to that particular iteration.
It was just based on an assessment of what's the fastest, most direct route to get through
To Mass.
to Mass Road to get out.
Even though there are, I mean, I guess there are stop signs on every block on that road. But
Well, that's part of my point. I mean, it's a, when I talk about the disruption, that's part of what I'm saying. The whole, in the previous conversation, we kept the downtown and residents together. That whole area gets disrupted in a new, different way.
And it is a little arbitrary. I mean, I talked to the firefighters that drive on these runs and said, if you were here, how would you do it? There's 2 or 3 options, and regardless of which one gets chosen, your comment is valid to that route. So it, you know, this is an example of a route. It's not gonna be the route.
okay.
And there may be some trial and error too of, you know, we haven't routinely done it. Once in a while, we're in one place and we get called to go back, you know, that direction. And so this was sort of a first pass of what's likely to happen, but.
Yeah, I mean, time of day is gonna dictate too, because
Traffic.
if the traffic is backed up, they're gonna
And
turn as soon as
that's-
they can get away from the.
And that's what I think people were assuming, worst case scenario, that it's end of the day, the traffic is lined up, heading westbound, and so the decision to turn is gonna be as quick as possible.
Yeah, and you can't cut down into this because it's.
Correct, it's too sharp of a,
Yeah.
kind of an S, especially if there's traffic, you know, they're waiting to come the other direction.
Well, to answer your question, Justin, I'll come right back to you. To answer your question, I think we were trying to ask the questions to make sure that we had all the information. And I don't know if there's other new requests that are out there now. We'll find out here in a second. But that's what, I think we're getting towards where it'll be on the agendas as a different item. David?
Yep, thank you. So all the decisions we make here involve trade-offs. And we're all gonna weigh the components of those trade-offs differently. I also think the vast majority of decisions we make, well, development decisions we make, I guess, have the potential to impact either positively or negatively neighbors in some sense, right? I guess it surprises me a bit that for this particular topic, the primary concern seems to be the potential negative impact to neighbors. And I'm sure you can understand why. While I can appreciate those concerns, recognizing that again, most of the developmental changes in the community have the chance to impact positively or negatively the neighbors. What is compelling to me about the MAP site is what I see as a positive trade-off of more centrally locating the station respective to City of Dexter residents. So if you look at the balance of calls to the northwest, call it, of the current station versus what would be the balance of calls to the southeast of the station, east, southeast, there's proportionately more calls closer to the MAP site. Call the middle equally, you know, we don't have exact numbers here. So what I think stuck out to me was focusing just on the City of Dexter, the distribution of calls there, and what the MAP site gained City of Dexter residents overall, understanding that residents who aren't used to having a fire truck going down the street, it will take them getting used to. I can definitely appreciate that. I'm just curious if anybody else was struck by the fact that the City of Dexter call might be better served by the MAP location, or if you're interpreting that map differently.
Joe?
Looked like it was the exact same thing, just flipped to the other side. I saw no difference between the two. It's just whether it happens to be more westerly side or more easterly side. To directly address the question that you had about, did you? The number of runs that are on the, to the, out of the site, the majority of them are in the middle. In other words, if you were to map out all of them or the whole city, I don't think either site would be. It would be somewhere in the middle, probably closer to, you know, as, or not closer to, where Hudson, which street is that? Where Inverness goes across or near Lions Park, something like that, because the vast majority are right in the center. And
I
then
can tell you
the-
how I came up with my numbers.
I'm sorry.
I can tell you how I came up with my numbers.
Okay.
Without count. So I was adding Westridge and Cedars, 52. Then you could take here on Farms, 15, you could take Dexter, Ann Arbor, Road Corridor, 15, that gets you to 30, Dexter Crossing right there gets you to 52. You could add Industrial Park, 52 plus 16 and 68, Walkabout Creek, 68 plus 14. I don't know. I'm blanking right now, 86. You could add the schools in there, you get over 100. I would call those closer to the MAV than downtown, but we don't have exact data. If we wanted to go that level, we could. Eyeballing the map, that's how I came up with that.
You're using the 2018 map.
It's on page 225.
Yeah.
Yeah, 22.
Yes, that's on, sit down and then maybe.
Thank you.
Yes.
In terms of the maps, I had a similar reading, especially with the one on 224, 2022. One of my, I think our question last time was, so understanding the impact on, for example, Hudson and Second, those who will be impacted if MAV is the site. One of our questions I thought was to have data about how many of those calls are that go to Webster, are medical calls that would show our what is that can, in the expansion of the substations, would reduce from the numbers that would actually go through that area. And I think actually, I don't know if this is, it kind of came as a point, not necessarily to say that calls matter this hour or that hour. Do we have an average of what time of the day things are? So if there are times that the trucks can go down the through downtown versus going through the neighborhood. I totally understand the impact on the neighborhood. And not only the sound that, you know, can be even perceived and heard these from even today, but the fact that those trucks go down, their lack of sidewalks, I think to me is the importance of getting, for me, to the decision is that comprehensive and total cost of ownership kind of thing. Of what is we want to see in our downtown. To me, it's not one thing by itself, and sort of like having an understanding of our downtown. What do we want to see as a vibrant downtown? What do we want to see as potential improvements? All of those things come together in my mind for my decision. So if we can understand what is the impact on Hudson and Second or those neighborhoods a little bit better, at least for me, would be very helpful.
I just want to say that I know my question, you know, a few minutes ago was about the run through my own particular neighborhood. But that's not the only thing I'm thinking about, and that's definitely like one of many priorities I'm thinking about when I'm looking at this, and so I just want to be clear about that. I'm thinking about, I don't know, I mean, lots of things. We're sitting here talking about the last couple of months and not having enough DPW workers. Do we really, like, even if we vacate the building that we're currently in, we still have to maintain it. It's a building. It's another piece of property for us to maintain. If we don't vacate the building, there's potential to sell a piece of property that could pay down the bond that we're taking out on what would be a renovation. And then we would be doing what we've all been talking about, which is trying to get the cost, not all of us, but a lot of us have been talking about trying to get the cost down for the citizens. I think we've had David get up here and try to trim the costs a lot. I just don't, you know, there's a lot of small costs we can cut here and there on either one. But for me, it's hard to ignore the potential, and I know it would have to be by a vote of the people, but it's hard to ignore the potential of selling that prime piece of real estate that could turn back into something that goes onto our tax rolls, that makes our city money. And at the same time, we could potentially use that money to put toward the cost of this fire station. So I mean, I'm weighing a lot of things, not just the neighborhood, and you know, I'm not, there's a lot of factors, we all know this. So I just don't want to be misrepresented as just looking at one thing.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I think that potentially is a good segue into if people are willing to go to the supplement. So Kyle Marsh had reached out to me, possibly even Zach, with a vision for the math property that would perhaps use less of that site and leave it open for other development, which might achieve the end you're talking about and a few others. And also, I think way back when, before my time on council, there might have been an analysis done by Zach that talked about the taxable value being higher downtown than it is further out. So if we're wanting to free one up for taxable value, it might be better to free up the one that's downtown because I think those yield greater. I don't know if that's true or not. I don't know if this would be a time, if people think it would impact. I mean, I'm comfortable with what I've said about what the new information that's in the packet. I appreciate the non-additional questions in terms of medical, et cetera, and how that might change. I would be happy to. This is not something I put together, Kyle put it together. He's on the call. I don't know if he'd be willing to do an introduction or if that's what anybody would want. But maybe it would help as we continue to weigh the trade-off of the location. At least with the points Wa raised, if we were able to do something like that, maybe the trade-offs would weigh differently. But again, I haven't heard from Chief Armstrong to know if a site configured in that way is practical, useful, et cetera. So I think the point of introducing it was just to see at first glance, do people think it's compelling? Do they want to have an opportunity to talk about it more? Would it impact their decision on location? If so, how do we have that conversation?
Well,
But I just want to follow up that, because I think it is good to look at both sides of what I was saying, both locations. You know, like I said, you know, we have to put this to go to the people, and, you know, okay, downtown may provide like a higher taxable value. But I'm concerned, I'm just, this is all speculation, I'm just talking, like, would the citizens want to give up that piece of property? I feel like they'd be, you know, the other piece of property is not something central to our downtown, it's not something they're used to having, I don't know, I'm just thinking out loud here, it's.
well, that corner that Kyle has, put into a picture. And I think we would all love that. For years, that's what we were hoping, and somebody would want to do something there. Now, you know, whether it's exactly this or, you know, some version of that, right? This is just a concept. I'm all for that. But I don't know that subdividing it necessarily, I don't know if that gives the necessary room for the fire station.
It's also not something to build.
Well, like, but it could be either going as a PUD or it could be rezoned, it was within It's adjacent to residential, it's adjacent to school, you know, it's not. Or there's a will, there's a way, you know, I mean, I'm just saying, I'm not against these ideas. Well, we'd have to sell the property. You know, to somebody to do it. Right, if we take a vote, we'll do them. But
That's the wild card.
yep. That,
I just want to add with the little historical remembrance for folks who haven't been in it long. We actually looked at sites, including the St. Joseph Parish Hall, which would have meant 100% of the runs would have been right past houses. We looked at sites on Second Street, which would have all been through there. We looked at the addition to the old Union School, where the gym was, which is all residential there. My little giggle moment now is my neighbor across the street used to be Phil Arbor, and I asked him some of his adventures with fire stationing, and he said they first brought it up in 1997 when he's the village president. So this is our silver anniversary year. That was just kind of neat. Anyways, that's all.
does anybody need additional information? Dan?
I've been around a while and haven't been on council a long time. It just seems like this gets more confusing as we go through this, okay? Because I honestly didn't think about the neighborhoods, which is a great point. I didn't think about if we use a MAD property, is the city residents gonna let us sell? I mean, is that what council wants to do? Is sell the building at 8140 at? Or if we use 8140, do we have to go to the residents to sell the MAD property? I know you guys have worked really hard on this and you've been through some painful meetings on this. But there's an awful lot to digest on this. And I'm trying to catch up as quick as possible on it. I do appreciate Juan's remarks with having another building. Say we do the MAP problem and we have another, and then we're gonna have 2 buildings that we gotta maintain if we don't sell it. That's a lot of extra work. So we go to the MAP property and we have the old 8140. Everybody here realizes that we gotta do something with that, right? I mean, if we're gonna keep that building and we're gonna do something, so we're adding even more tax dollars onto what we're trying to do unless we're going to sell that. Is that a fair statement? Thank you.
I can't address the maintenance question. The contract for the newer substations, the DAFU pays for a lot more of the maintenance for the things that we're doing for the downtown. So that was a nice thing. The question of additional information. Have we got indication from David when he's going to be able to show the aerials over, or the plan overlay on the aerials?
Yeah, and I got that information from Dave, yeah.
You think we're gonna have that by the next meeting?
Well, I will, probably.
Wow, that's enough.
I don't think maybe I just want to reiterate, I think Son said it earlier, but the information on the breakdown of calls, medical versus fire, especially the ones going out of town. I mean, all of them really. It's just something I do want to see when we talked about it at the last meeting. Sorry to add more work. But it's a complex decision and
That and if potentially we can have breakout by the time of day.
I did take note of that.
It's in the report I sent you.
Okay, okay to move on range. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak this evening? One online? Is it the case by using the raise hand feature if you do? I'll do that. Okay. Okay, we can recognize that. Okay. Kyle, can you hear us?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Sure. So I just wanted to say thanks for looking at those sketches and considering them. I just, not to throw another wrench in the gears there for you. I know you got a lot of moving parts with this whole thing, but just thought I'd get it in front of you and so see what you thought. So,
What is your address, Kyle, just officially for the minutes?
sure, it's 78 24th Street.
Thank you. 78 24th Street. Okay, thanks for your work on it, for sharing the ideas.
All right, thank you.
Josh, you seen anybody else online?
No.
Also? No. Okay, council comments, we'll start with our student reps. Adam? I have no comments today. Mine?
I don't think I have anything like that.
Good one.
I'm gonna go with no as well.
Nothing? Good. Zach? No. Jamie?
Did have something that I meant to ask about, but I don't think that's the answer now. What we approved on the consent agenda about the painting, the exterior of the water tower, so the engineering services,
Yeah,
is there still the opportunity to have a conversation about whether we're painting Dexter on the water tower?
yes, yeah, so this isn't to design the painting, this is just to, number one, help us through the bidding process. Number two, design the railings that were now required at the top of the tower. And then to, get us through taking the tower down and taking the tower back up. There will be a separate, item to approve the bid award for whatever company we select for.
Yeah, I would like to recognize and thank Marie, Justin, Michelle, everybody on the staff that brought us to yet another audit that is clear and beautiful. And the fact that you throughout the year keep up on it, keep up on the practices, what is coming, what is new, what is changing, it's bring us year to year to a meeting that is like tonight, and I want to appreciate it.
I want to just add something. I don't usually comment at this time, but I forgot to recognize the work that Rod did on the proclamation that I read. In my haste to hand the 3 copies to Coach, I meant to acknowledge you drafted that, and Justin helped with a few tweaks. I didn't see it till today. She did a great job and scheduling it all and getting it going. So thank you for your role. That we could remember, put that in the minutes somewhere. You recognize that, I appreciate it. Thank you.
And thanks for cleaning up the areas.
Okay, there's no proposed agenda items for future meeting listed here. So I move down to adjournment. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I'm gonna do it there.
Moved by Juan. Second by Dan. Favors, side please. Have a good night, everybody.